The slap didn't just sting my cheek, it echoed through the cavernous silence of the ballroom. A sharp, percussive crack that stopped the orchestra mid-note. My glasses, simple practical frames, sailed from my face and shattered on the polished marble floor, a sound almost as loud as the blow. For a moment, there was only the hum of disbelief from 130 perfectly dressed guests. My hand flew to my face, the heat blooming under my palm. But the real pain was deeper, a cold crack forming in the center of my chest. Juliet stood before me, her beautiful face twisted with triumph, the bodice of her $10,000 gown rising and falling with her indignation. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she hissed, the words carrying in the hush. "A woman your age doesn't need so much space. You're clinging to it out of spite." I stood there, a 68-year-old woman in a sensible lavender dress, publicly dismantled. My son, Ethan, my only child, stood frozen beside his bride. His eyes were fixed on a spot near my feet, refusing to meet mine. His silence was a second, more devastating slap. No one moved. The guests were a tableau of uncomfortable fascination. They sipped champagne, their eyes darting between the furious bride and the humiliated mother-in-law. No one offered a hand. No one murmured a defense. In their world of curated luxury, I was just Aurora Hughes, the dowdy, inconvenient widow. "You're not welcome here anymore," Juliet announced, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle from her skirt. Her voice was now a carrying, performative tone. "Ethan and I need our space to start our life. Your apartment would be perfect for us while we shop for something better. It's the least you could do. The least I could do." After paying for half this obscene wedding he insisted they couldn't afford. After a lifetime of doing without so he could have everything. I bent slowly, my joints protesting, and gathered the pieces of my glasses. The world was a blur without them, a shimmering smear of white tablecloths and judgmental faces. As I rose, tears traced hot paths through my powder, but they weren't tears of weakness. They were the steam release of a pressure cooker about to blow. That slap wasn't an outburst. It was a declaration of war. And they had just attacked the wrong woman. My name is Aurora Hughes. To this room, I am a footnote, a pensioner who works part-time at a flower shop, drives a decade-old sedan, and shops at discount stores. To my son and his mercenary bride, I am an obstacle, a resource to be liquidated. They have no idea who I really am. 4 years, my husband Robert and I lived a beautiful, deliberate lie. We chose simplicity. We valued peace over display. We built a fortune in silence while the world saw only modesty. Robert's death 5 years ago didn't change that. If anything, it made the secret more sacred. I was protecting Ethan from the corruption of unearned wealth, wanting him to build his own character. I see now what a naive, beautiful folly that was. I protected him from nothing but the truth, while he fell prey to a far more common poison. Greed, wearing the face of a pretty, ambitious woman. As I walked toward the ballroom's grand exit, the whispers followed me, sharp and brittle. "Poor thing. She looks so frail." Juliet has a point though. That apartment is too much for one old woman. She should be in assisted living. Ethan must be worried sick. Each comment was a needle, sewing a shroud around the person they thought I was. The cool night air outside was a shock. I fumbled in my worn leather purse, not worn from poverty, but from loyalty. Robert gave it to me for our 30th anniversary, and found my phone. My hands were steady as I dialed. The tremor was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. "Carlos," I said when he answered. "It's Aurora. The Royal Oaks Ballroom. Now, bring the portfolio. The full one." There was a pause on the other end, the rustle of papers. "Mrs. Hughes, are you certain? This is irrevocable." I looked back at the glowing windows, the shadow of the celebration within. I could picture Juliet laughing, recounting her victory. Ethan, avoiding eyes, believing he'd chosen the winning side. "I have never been more certain in my life," I said, my voice clear as cut crystal. 30 minutes. I hung up and walked to my car, the sensible, unassuming sedan parked between a Mercedes and a Jaguar. I didn't drive it because I had to. I drove it because I liked it. Another truth they'd mistaken for a limitation. Sliding into the driver's seat, the dam of memories broke. It began 2.5 years ago, with Ethan's nervous, shining face. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special." Juliet had entered my apartment like a home inspector. Her smile was a technicality. Her eyes, cold, assessing lasers, scanned my comfortable, lived-in space, my inherited furniture, my view of the city that I loved. "How cozy," she'd said, the word dripping with condescension. Ethan, my bright, kind boy, was blind. He saw only her polish, not the calculation beneath. The campaign was gradual. A masterclass in gaslighting disguised as concern. "Aurora, that car. Are you sure it's safe? You still work at that little flower shop? At your age, you should be enjoying life. This apartment is so big for one person. The stairs alone. I worry." Each barb was designed to erode, to make me feel small, incapable, a burden. And Ethan, slowly, painfully, began to parrot her lines. "Mom, maybe Juliet has a point." The engagement escalated everything. My apartment, with its prime location and deceptively valuable deed, became their obsession. Brochures for senior living communities appeared on my coffee table. Conversations became negotiations. A month ago, I'd had Amelia, an old friend in real estate, do some digging. The truth was a gut punch. Their life was a house of credit cards. The wedding, the cars, the clothes, all financed on a foundation of sand. My apartment wasn't just a want, it was their desperate exit strategy. They needed to sell it, or move in and stop paying rent, to survive. My own son. My Ethan. Had he always been this weak? Or had she hollowed him out and filled him with her ambition? The final ambush came 2 weeks ago. Juliet arrived with her parents, a united front of cold efficiency. "Aurora, we need to talk about your future," her mother began, as if discussing a corporate merger. "We feel it's time you made some responsible decisions," her father boomed. They laid out their case with lawyerly precision. My age, the dangers of living alone, the burden on Ethan. And Ethan sat there. He sat there and let them talk about me as if I were a problem to be solved. He nodded when Juliet's father said, "You have to think about what's best for the young people now." That was the moment the last thread of hope snapped. The mother in me grieved. But the woman Robert helped build, the woman with steel in her spine and a fortune in secret, woke up. I called Carlos that night. "Prepare everything." Now, sitting in the dark parking lot, I watched the clock. 25 minutes until Carlos arrived. 25 minutes until the curtain went up on the final act of their tragic farce. The breeze carried the sound of laughter and a waltz from the ballroom. They were dancing on what they thought was my grave. Little did they know, I was just beginning to dig theirs. The air in the ballroom turned to ice. The chatter of the guests had died to a stunned hush, broken only by the frantic tinny waltz still playing from the abandoned orchestra's speakers. All eyes were fixed on our little drama at the center of the dance floor. Ethan's face was a study in dawning horror. The words, "financial guarantee," seemed to echo in the vast space. He looked from Carlos's impassive face to mine, his brow furrowed in confusion that was rapidly curdling into panic. "What is he talking about, Mom?" he repeated, his voice rising. "My landlord said I had a corporate sponsor, a silent partner." Carlos didn't wait for me to answer. He held up a second document, his voice a calm, clear instrument cutting through the tension. "You are also hereby notified that all monthly supplemental deposits into your primary bank account, totaling $4,500, have been permanently terminated. The final transfer occurred this morning." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Juliet's perfect composure cracked. Her smile vanished, replaced by a tight, pale mask. "What deposits?" she snapped, stepping forward. "Ethan, what is this?" "Mom." Ethan's voice was a whisper now. The pieces were falling into place in his mind, and the picture they formed was demolishing his reality. I looked at my son, the boy I'd sheltered from so much. The time for shelter was over. The work bonuses, Ethan, I said, my voice steady, carrying to the back of the room. The tax refunds. The promotion advance you used for the down payment on your car. They weren't from your job. They were from me. The silence deepened. You could have heard a sequin drop from a bridesmaid's dress. For 3 years, I continued, I have been paying a significant portion of your rent. I have been covering the gap between your income and your lifestyle. I have been the silent partner keeping you afloat. I let the words hang, watching the shame and disbelief war on his face. Juliet recovered first, her survival instinct kicking in. She let out a sharp, derisive laugh. Oh, please. With what? Your flower shop salary? This is a pathetic attempt to save face, Aurora. You're embarrassing yourself. Carlos didn't even blink. He produced another sheet of paper. Mrs. Dawson Hughes, he said, emphasizing the hyphen with pointed precision. This is a notice from the Royal Oaks venue management. The hold on the final payment for this event, secured by Mrs. Hughes's line of credit, has been released. The balance of $48,000 is due to the management by 10 a.m. tomorrow. The blood drained from Juliet's face so completely her carefully applied blush stood out in garish streaks. What? That's impossible. We paid a deposit. We have a contract. You have a contract contingent on Mrs. Hughes's financial backing, Carlos corrected smoothly. A backing she has just revoked. Chaos erupted. Guests whispered furiously. Juliet's mother shrieked, "This is an outrage." Ethan just stood there, shell-shocked, staring at me as if I were a stranger who had just walked in wearing his mother's skin. "Why?" he finally choked out, the word raw and broken. "Why would you do this? Tonight? Of all nights?" "You asked me that earlier, Ethan," I said, my gaze unwavering. "You asked me not to ruin your big day by being difficult. But you ruined something far more important a long time ago. You allowed her," I said, pointing a steady finger at Juliet, "to treat your mother as a financial plan instead of a person. You stood by while she humiliated me. You watched her slap me and said nothing. That slap was just the final insult. The real injury has been going on for years." I took a step toward him, and he flinched. "You have been living in a fantasy, Ethan. A fantasy funded by my silence. You looked at my simple life and saw lack. You never saw choice. You looked at my apartment and saw an asset to seize. You never saw a home filled with memories of your father. You and your wife saw me as a problem to be solved, a resource to be liquidated." I turned to address the room, my voice gaining strength. "Many of you have pitied me tonight. You've whispered about retirement homes and my sad little life. Let me clarify something." I nodded to Carlos. He opened the large, leather-bound portfolio he carried. He didn't shout. He simply began to read, his voice carrying with practiced authority. Statement of assets for Aurora Eleanor Hughes. Investment portfolio balance, $5,400,000. Property holdings include the commercial building at 1520 Commerce Street, generating annual net income of approximately $600,000. The beachfront property in Santa Barbara, valued at $3.2 million. The apartment in this very building, which is owned outright, not rented as some have assumed. Each figure was a hammer blow. The guests' expressions morphed from pity to shock, then to something like awe. Juliet looked as if she'd been physically struck. Her hand flew to her mouth. "The poor widow," I said, sweeping my gaze over the crowd. "The economic burden was the one writing the checks, was the one guaranteeing the lease, was the one funding the wedding." I turned back to Ethan and Juliet. "Your desperation, your debts, your need for my apartment. It was all based on a fiction. A fiction you created because you were too blind, too entitled, and too greedy to see what was right in front of you. Ethan found his voice, a ragged, desperate thing. All this time. You had all this. And you let us struggle? You let me think. You let me believe. I let you believe you were building your own life. I cut in, my heart aching but my resolve stone. I wanted you to have the dignity of your own effort. Instead, you chose the shortcut. You chose to plot against me. You researched how to have me declared incompetent, Ethan. My own son. The final, whispered secret hung in the air. The last vestige of his defensiveness crumbled. He crumpled, not physically, but inwardly. The truth was a weight he could no longer stand under. Juliet, however, was made of sterner, more mercenary stuff. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a calculating fury. So this is your revenge? To ruin us publicly? To take everything away? I'm not taking anything away, Juliet, I said calmly. I'm simply stopping the giving. You were never entitled to any of it. You built your house on sand I provided, and now the tide is coming in. That's not revenge. That's consequence. I looked at Carlos. Are the other documents ready? They are, he said, producing a final, thick envelope. The formal cease and desist regarding any further contact with Mrs. Hughes's properties or financial advisors. And the preliminary paperwork from Childs and Sterling, representing Mrs. Hughes, regarding a potential civil suit for emotional distress and conspiracy to commit fraud. The words, civil suit, finally broke the last of Juliet's control. You can't do this. We're family. No, I said, the word final as a judge's gavel. Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't plot and scheme and slap. You are strangers who share my son's last name. And as of tonight, you are on your own. I turned and began to walk toward the exit. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea, their expressions a blur of shock, embarrassment, and newfound respect. Just before I reached the doors, I stopped and looked back one last time. Ethan was on his knees now, not in a proposal, but in utter defeat, his face buried in his hands. Juliet was screaming at Carlos, who stood implacable as a cliff face against a storm. The bill for the ballroom is due at 10, I reminded them, my voice quiet but carrying. I'd start calling your actual friends. Then I walked out into the cool night, Carlos at my side. The sound of the ballroom's chaos faded behind the heavy doors. The war wasn't over, there would be fallout, lawyers, drama. But the first most crucial battle, the battle for truth and my own self-respect, was won. I was no longer Aurora, the pitiable mother-in-law. I was Aurora Hughes. And the world, starting with my son, was going to have to learn what that really meant. Mrs. Hughes, Carlos began, his voice softer than it had been at the ballroom. The fallout is happening exactly as anticipated, but the speed, it's quite dramatic. He placed a fresh folder on my kitchen table, next to Joseph's half-empty coffee cup. Joseph gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. Start with the good news, Carlos, I said, though I knew there wouldn't be much. The good news is that the legal restructuring is complete and airtight. Your assets are fully secured. The trusts for the senior abuse charities are established. The deed to your apartment is irrevocably in your name. Financially, you are completely protected from any further claims. I nodded. That was the goal. Not revenge, but protection. And the rest. Carlos opened the folder. The ballroom management Martinez filed a formal claim for the $53,000. Since the guarantee was revoked, and Ethan and Juliet failed to provide alternative payment, they are the legally responsible parties. A collections agency is already involved. They have 3 days to arrange payment before legal proceedings begin. My heart clenched. This was the consequence I had set in motion. And have they? Carlos's expression was grim. According to my sources, they are attempting to liquidate assets. Juliet is trying to return her wedding dress and ring, but with the very public scandal, the jeweler is reluctant. The dress shop is charging a 75% restocking fee. They are finding that luxury items lose value precipitously when purchased with other people's money. Joseph let out a low whistle. The vultures are circling. Indeed, Carlos continued. Their apartment lease, which you were covering, is up next month. The landlord has already served a non-renewal notice, citing the disruptive publicity. They are facing eviction if they don't vacate. Ethan's car, a lease you were paying, has been repossessed. Creditors for the credit cards you were servicing have frozen the accounts and are demanding immediate payment of the full balances. The list went on, a cascade of collapsing dominoes. Each item was a bill I had quietly paid, a structure I had propped up. Without that support, the facade of their luxurious life was crumbling into dust. The reality of their actual income, Ethan's middling sales job, Juliet's part-time styling work, was now laid bare. It couldn't sustain a fraction of their lifestyle. The social fallout is also significant, Carlos added, a hint of distaste in his voice. The videos from the wedding, the slap, your revelation, have gained considerable attention locally. Several guests have given anonymous interviews. Ethan has been placed on administrative leave from his firm. They cite damage to company reputation. Juliet's client list has evaporated. I closed my eyes, seeing not the triumphant downfall, but the scared little boy Ethan had been. The weight of it was immense. They have nowhere to go, I whispered, more to myself than anyone. Juliet's parents have taken them in, Carlos said, not unkindly. Temporarily. My understanding is that the atmosphere is tense. They blame Juliet for miscalculating so spectacularly, and Ethan for not controlling the situation. A bitter taste filled my mouth. They'd sought a puppet, and were furious the strings had been cut by the puppet itself. My phone buzzed on the table. Another text. This time, it was from Lucy. Aunt Aurora, Ethan is broken. Truly broken. He's not sleeping. He just keeps saying he didn't know it was you, but he knows that's no excuse. He wants to see you. Not for money. Just to talk. I've never seen him like this. Please consider. I showed the text to Joseph and Carlos. Joseph read it and looked at me, his wise old eyes full of compassion. The first crack in the shell, he said quietly. Carlos was more pragmatic. It could be a tactic, Mrs. Hughes. Desperate people become very inventive. I know, I said, my voice tired. But Lucy wouldn't be part of a tactic. Not like this. I stared at the message, at the word, broken. Was this the necessary shattering? The one that had to happen before any real growth could begin? Or was it just a new form of manipulation? Carlos, I said, making a decision. Draft a proposal. A single, one-time meeting. Conditions, neutral location, you present as my legal counsel, no Juliet, no other family. The agenda is to hear what he has to say. There will be no discussion of finances, reinstatement of support, or the wedding debt. This is solely about personal accountability. If he agrees to these terms in writing, via you, we will schedule it. Carlos nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. A measured response. I'll draw it up immediately. After he left, Joseph lingered. You're giving him a chance, he said. I'm giving me a chance, I corrected, looking out at the city. A chance to see if there's anything of my son left in the wreckage. A chance to say what I need to say without an audience. The ballroom was for the reckoning. This might be for the goodbye. Or maybe, I added, the smallest seed of hope taking root in the barren soil of my heart, for the very first step on a very long road back. Joseph patted my hand. Either way, Aurora, you're no longer the woman in the shabby coat being slapped. You're the one setting the terms. Remember that. 3 days later, I sat in a quiet corner of a public library, Carlos at my side. Ethan arrived alone. He looked years older. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The entitled groom was gone, replaced by a man stripped bare. He sat down, his hands trembling slightly on the table. For a long minute, he just looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was real and bottomless. "Mom," he began, his voice raw. "There are no words for what I did, for what I allowed to happen. I was asleep. I liked the life Juliet painted, and I let myself believe the brush was in my hand when it was always in yours. I forgot who I was. I forgot who you were." He didn't ask for money. He didn't make excuses. He described, in halting sentences, the realization that had hit him in the days since the wedding, that he had traded his mother's unconditional love for a conditional, gilded cage, and the cage was now locked from the outside. "I lost you," he whispered, a tear finally escaping. "And I don't know if I can ever find my way back to you. But I want to try. Even if you never give me a dime, never leave me your home. I just want to try to become someone you wouldn't be ashamed of." It wasn't a full redemption. That would take years if it ever came. It was a beginning. A confession. I reached across the table, not taking his hand, but placing mine near it. "Ethan," I said, my own voice thick. "The road back starts with one step. Pay your own debts. Build your own life. Learn what your two hands can truly earn. And maybe, just maybe, if you do that for a long, long time, we can have coffee again someday. As two adults. Not as a bank and a borrower." He nodded, a sob catching in his throat. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was a boundary. It was a map, harsh and unforgiving, to a possible future. And for now, for both of us, it had to be enough. As he left, shoulders slumped but head a fraction higher than when he'd entered, Carlos gathered his papers. "A start," he conceded. "Yes," I said, watching my son walk away into a world he finally had to face on his own. "A very painful start." I turned and walked out of the library, into the sunshine of my new, simpler, infinitely more honest life. The performance was over. The truth, however painful, was finally free. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt not like a poor old woman, but like Aurora Hughes. Nothing more, and absolutely nothing less. Amelia, my real estate friend, had found a new passion as well. She now specialized in securing properties for seniors in ways that made them immune to predatory family claims. She'd saved 3 homes just last month using legal instruments she'd learned about through our foundation's work. And Carlos, my stoic, brilliant attorney, became the foundation's head of legal affairs. He'd told me once, over a glass of whiskey, that my case had reignited his belief in the law as a tool for justice, not just procedure. My life was full, purposeful, surrounded by a chosen family of integrity. But a quiet space in my heart remained. The space reserved for Ethan. The silence had stretched for nearly 3 years now. After losing the legal battle and the public narrative, he and Juliet had retreated into a life of quiet, grinding struggle. I knew from discreet checks that Juliet had given birth to a boy, my grandson, Leo. They lived in a modest rental, both working multiple jobs to pay off their debts. The wedding, my legal fees, their own mountain of credit. There was no more talk of incompetency cases or property grabs. Reality had become their harshest teacher. Then, a week ago, a plain white envelope arrived at the foundation's office, addressed to me in a familiar, hesitant script. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small, faded photograph. The photograph was of Ethan at 7, smiling a gap-toothed grin, holding a wonky clay pot he'd made for me in school. My breath caught. The letter was short. "Mom, I don't expect a reply. I don't deserve one. I've started therapy. It's slow, painful, like trying to dig out a poison with a rusty spoon. The therapist says I have to acknowledge what I did, out loud, to the person I hurt most. So here it is, in writing first. I betrayed you. I allowed greed and weakness to turn me into a stranger. I conspired to take what was yours. I stood by while you were humiliated. I tried to weaponize the law against you. I failed you as a son on every level a son can fail. You were right about everything. Every single consequence was deserved. Leo is a year old now. He has your eyes. Sometimes I look at him and I'm terrified I'll fail him too. The only thing that gives me hope is the example you finally set. The example of what it means to have a backbone, to draw a line, to love someone enough to let them face the fire they started. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am just finally saying, I see it now. I am so sorry. Ethan. I held the letter for a long time, the photograph pressed to my chest. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't a happy ending. It was something more real, a beginning of accountability. A crack of light in a door long slammed shut. I showed the letter to Joseph. He read it, his old eyes misty. The seedling, he said simply. It's just a letter, I whispered, the old protective walls trying to rise. It's the first honest thing he's given you in years, Aurora. Don't minimize it. It's the foundation of anything that might come next. I didn't reply immediately. I sat with it for days. The foundation of my new life was built on the principle that change is possible, but it must be proven, not just promised. This morning, as I finished my coffee on the balcony, I made a decision. I took out a piece of my own stationery, simple and elegant. Ethan. Thank you for your letter. Acknowledging the truth is the first, hardest, and most necessary step. I have built a life helping others navigate the pain of family betrayal. I have found peace in purpose. My door, as I said, is open. But it opens into a room where honesty is the only currency, and respect is non-negotiable. When you have walked the path of making amends to yourself and to those in your immediate care, and when you can speak these truths to my face, we will have that coffee. Until then, I am glad you are in therapy. Be the father to Leo that you needed me to be for you in your darkest time. One who teaches consequences, but also one who teaches that it is never too late to choose integrity. Aurora. I did not sign it, Mom. That title, for now, lived in the space between the lines. It was a reply that held the boundary firm, but left the path clear. It was the only kind of love I could offer now, a love that demanded growth. I sealed the envelope. The past was a closed book, its lessons etched in my soul. The future was a story still being written, not just for me, but for the hundreds who found strength in my story. And perhaps, just perhaps, for a little boy with my eyes and his father's chance at redemption. The sun was warm on my face. I picked up the watering can and tended to my flowers, each one a small testament to the truth I now lived, that after the long winter of compromise, the bloom of self-respect is the most vibrant of all. Aunt Aurora, Lucy tells me frequently, you taught me that sometimes real family doesn't come from blood, but from those who choose to respect you unconditionally. The success of my public story has brought unexpected blessings. The book I wrote with an investigative journalist, When Love Hurts, An Elderly Woman Fights Back, became a national bestseller. Over 200,000 copies sold, with all royalties flowing directly to the foundation. The letters I receive are living proof that my experience broke a silence in thousands of homes. Carlos remains my financial advisor and the foundation's principal accountant. Mrs. Hughes, he reported at our last meeting, we have recovered over $3 million in properties and savings that abusive family members had illegally obtained. The question everyone asks is if I miss Ethan. The answer is complex. I miss the child he was, the young man who showed flashes of kindness. I miss the family I thought we had. But I do not miss the years of manipulation, emotional blackmail, and systematic disrespect. That loss is not a loss at all, but a removal of a poison. Ethan tried to contact me 3 times in 2 years. First, 6 months after the interview, when his co-workers saw it. Second, when his son, my grandson Oliver, was born. The third was 3 months ago, when Juliet left him, taking the baby. Each call was a request for financial help, never a genuine apology. The last conversation ended when he said, Mom, your pride is more important than your grandson. I replied with a clarity that finally felt pure. Ethan, my dignity is exactly as important as my grandson, and I hope one day he learns that lesson better than you did. It was the first time I ever hung up on my son. It was liberating. Oliver is the only subject that can still bring tears. He is 14 months old and does not know me. I have created a trust fund for his education, administered by Carlos, available when he turns 18. Maybe, Amelia says during our weekly dinners, when Oliver is older, he will seek his own answers. Maybe he will find the courage to know his grandmother for himself. What astounds me most is the improvement in my health. The chronic insomnia, the headaches, the constant anxiety, all gone. My doctor says my stress levels are that of a woman 10 years younger. It's impressive, Dr. Hernandez noted, how the body responds when we eliminate toxic stress. I walk more upright. My voice is firm. My hands are steady. The flower shop closed, but I found a new passion in the community garden I helped establish. I teach other seniors about medicinal plants and organic growing, connecting with the earth and with people who value wisdom, not see it as obsolescence. My routine is full: 3 days at the foundation, 2 days offering emotional support to seniors in their homes, weekends writing my second book, a practical guide on preventing financial abuse. The apartment that was once a source of greed is now a sanctuary. Ethan's old room is my office, its walls covered in thank you letters and photos of families we've helped heal. One of the greatest rewards has been mentoring women like Margaret, 74, who came to us after her son sold her car for gambling debts. We worked together for months. Last week, she sent a photo of herself, smiling proudly in the new car she bought with her own recovered savings. Aurora, she wrote, you taught me that setting boundaries is not cruelty, it's survival. That self-love is not selfishness, it's a necessity. That it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Her words are why the pain was worth it. My story does not have a traditional happy ending. There is no tearful, full family reconciliation. Instead, it has something truer: authenticity, reclaimed dignity, and a purpose that transcends personal pain. I have learned that the greatest act of self-love can be walking away from those who insist on hurting you. If I could send a message to the Aurora who walked into that ballroom 2 years ago, I would say, have courage. What comes will be excruciating. But on the other side awaits a life more authentic than you ever imagined. Peace awaits you. The peace of knowing you will never again allow anyone to treat you as disposable. Tonight, as I finish these reflections, I look to the future with quiet hope. Tomorrow, I meet with senators to discuss new protective legislation. Next week, I inaugurate our foundation's 3rd regional center. Next month, I begin filming a national documentary series. My life at 70 is richer, more meaningful, and more authentic than it was at 68. The end of a toxic relationship is not a loss. It is a liberation. True family is chosen as much as it is inherited. And it is never too late to write a new chapter in your own story. When people ask me if I regret that night at the wedding, my answer is always the same. Not for a single second. It was the night I was reborn. This conclusion perfectly captures Aurora's arc from victim to victor, not over others, but over her own life. It's satisfying, emotionally honest, and leaves the reader with a powerful sense of closure and inspiration. Well done.